Hi, I'm Kassy, and this is the Spark Konnect, a podcast about what brings us to life: connection, creativity, courage, and the moments that spark real change. I'll be your host, bringing my experience as a speaker, consultant, and lifelong believer in showing up as your full self. In this series, Arts and Facilitation, you'll hear from inspiring voices, facilitators, trainers, speakers, and everyday humans who are also artists, lighting up the world in their own unique, creative ways. This is your space to reflect, reset, and reignite, because the spark is already in you. Let's light it up. I first met Skyler Westergard when he took my virtual trainer certification, and we became fast friends right away. You know that feeling when someone just gets it? That's Skyler. He's a landscape architect turned learning and development leader. And in this conversation, we explore how the art of designing beautiful gardens mirrors the art of designing meaningful learning. Skyler shares how observation, intentionality, and beauty all play a part in helping people grow, whether it's a team, a class, or a Japanese garden. We even talk about what he calls Gladiolus moments, those pivotal points of discovery that change how we see the world. As Skyler says, observation is so important. And after hearing him, you'll want to step outside, take a deep breath, and look a little closer at how learning, just like nature, can truly flourish. Hey, Skyler.
Hi, Kassy. How are you doing today?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. I'm so happy to be here with you. I feel like we've been planning this for weeks and weeks, and here you are. And so I'm so excited to learn all about landscape architecture and horticulture and learning and development. I think you're going to be my only guest. Well, as of now, you're my only guest that does this. And I just will be so surprised if I ever get to meet another one. We shall see. Maybe you know more and you can introduce me. But that said, tell us all about you, what you do in your work in learning and development. But then let's get into landscape architecture and horticulture, which is, well, what's inside of you, right? And where you come from.
Yeah, that sounds great. I appreciate you having me on. I always love the opportunity that you and I have to collaborate together. I will say there's probably not a lot of us that are landscape designers, landscape architects, and in learning and development. But, you know, that landscape world has been an artistic medium and interest for me since I was a kid. So we can get into that a little bit.
Really interesting. I mean, it's so interesting to me, Skyler, because it's just is something that's so unique and interesting to me that you would say since a kid. And so what do you mean when you say that?
So when I say I've been interested in it since I was a kid, I remember actually a very vivid memory when I was in elementary school, young elementary school, where my mom was planting Gladiolus bulbs. And you know, bulbs, if you planted bulbs, and especially as a kid, they just seem like they were, you know, like muddy rocks. It's like, how could this be a plant? You know, I've really not seen them before. And I remember she had them in a bag and we planted them in the front yard and you just bury them. It's like, I don't see anything. And just my mom teaching me at that time, like, we'll water these. And then if you keep watching them, they'll start to grow. And that triggered something in my brain I was so fascinated. Kassy, I went and looked at that spot where we planted those bulbs like multiple times a day, all spring and summer, waiting for something to happen. And it just was so intriguing. And so eventually those bulbs came up and they got bigger and bigger, and they flowered bright yellow gladiolus. So that was probably like an early thing for me, in that the beauty of plants, landscaping, the fascination that triggered. And that led to me like doing more in high school. I actually had my own landscape maintenance business in high school. I was my own boss and my own only employee, but I took care of some landscaping at some local hotels and things like that. So that led me in college to study it and to study design and its influence on both individuals and communities and society. So yeah, I could go on and on about that. But that's what I mean when I say since I was a kid, I've been fascinated with it.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. Of course, who hasn't thought about that? The magic of nature.
Yeah.
And something popping up through the dirt like that and becoming so beautiful. It makes perfect sense. Ah, that's really, really neat. What do you do in your work today as a learning and development professional?
Yeah, so in my work, it's been an interesting career trajectory. I definitely, as you can tell already, wanted to go into landscaping. That was my career goal, and that's what I've done. So I, did my undergrad and graduate work in horticulture, the study of plants and landscape architecture, and then worked in the landscape industry. I knew I always wanted to teach though. When I worked as a teaching assistant in graduate school, that was another like gladiola moment for me. I remember I've never even termed it that way
I
before.
love
It's
that
kind of
gladiola
a
moments. Did you just
gladiola
come up with the
moment.
title? You
I
just came
have
up with the title
coined
of
a
the
new
podcast.
term. Yeah, I've coined a new term. But I remember some moments as a teaching assistant where I was helping other students learn a concept and see the light bulb come on. And that was another like pivotal moment where like I really get satisfaction out of sharing passions that I have and knowledge that I have and helping other people. So that was a goal of mine. So after spending about 6 years in the profession, I got an opportunity to go back and teach as a college professor. So I taught landscape architecture and design and horticulture and plants and soils and irrigation and all that. And then how I got into the like L&D world was I had a colleague from my landscape, for-profit experience that reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're trying to create some learning training stuff for our employees, and would you be interested in doing some side work, some freelancing, consulting with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And make a long story short, that led over about a year to them bringing me back on, and I transitioned back on full time to working in L&D in the landscape world. So my role right now is a learning and development manager for a large national landscape management company. So what we do is we manage and maintain landscapes of commercial properties. So think of your favorite hotel or resort. That's the kind of stuff we take care of. Office complexes, hospitals, things like that. And we have about 3,500 employees around the country in 70 different locations. And so I manage our small L&D team, creating everything from creating training material to facilitating training for our teams internally. So I'm still in the landscape world, and I get to like do my passion of landscaping and also my passion of teaching and learning, and
That is so
yeah,
cool.
combine both.
That is so cool. I'm imagining, are all the training materials very beautiful, as just as the landscaping would be?
Yeah, of course they are. Of course they are.
We want to see. We want to see.
I
Yeah.
I will say I did not get, there's so many fantastic professions out there, and we do make them beautiful, and we have some really talented marketing and graphic designers in our company that help with some of that, like everything from slide layout to video. We do a lot of video creation, but yeah, we try to make it as pretty and beautiful and intuitive and all that as the landscape world.
It's like it would be expected. Do you have, you
Yeah.
said you mentioned, think about hotels and office spaces and things. Do you have any favorite hotel spaces that we could all go look up and say, oh, I see what Skylar's talking about there?
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some that we take care of. Not a lot of people have probably heard about our company. It's the name of it is Land Care, and it's really business to business. So it's not something you're going to see an advertisement for on TV or anything like that. There is some properties that probably a lot of our guests will be familiar with that we take care of. So like the Gaylord Resorts,
Grand Ole Opry.
the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. They do all their own the landscaping inside the Opryland, all that water and all the plants inside, but we take care of everything outside. Gaylord actually has a number of properties around the country. The one in Nashville, the Grand Ole Opry, is the most, or the one near the Grand Ole Opry is the most famous, but they have one in Florida. They have one here in Texas where I'm at. So we take care of those. We just won a gold award, a national gold award, taking care of T-Mobile's headquarters in outside of Seattle, Washington, which is kind of a neat one. I worked in Seattle. There's a quite famous park in the landscape world called Olympic Sculpture Park in Seattle, and we take care of that property. So there's some kind of cool ones, but
Yeah. What about for you? Like, do you have a favorite outside of maybe what the company may do? But do you have a certain kind of aesthetic, or is there a favorite hotel that you happen to love as a landscaper and find very beautiful and impactful for you?
for me personally, I love Japanese garden aesthetic. And that doesn't always work, necessarily well in like American resorts and hotels with a lot of people, but it's definitely our audience won't see this. You see, because we're on video, but I have a Japanese lantern behind me here in my office that was purchased in Japan from handmade paper lantern kind of thing. So that aesthetic, the principles behind it, what that design style is based off of, how it's actually created, is really resonates with me. And I'm actually in my own backyard building my own personal Japanese garden, which is a work in progress. So anytime I'm in space like that, and let me even say, Kassy, like one thing that's indicative of Japanese gardens is they look very, very natural, right? They're very organic, but
Yeah.
very, very intentional. Every stone placement is intentional.
I was just going to ask you, what are some of the design principles? And that's why
Yeah.
everything is with intention. And it has this feeling of being overgrown in some places, but everything is also perfectly overgrown. And it's incredible. I am immediately thinking of the San Francisco Japanese tea
Yes.
gardens. If you've been
Yeah,
there,
in Golden Gate Park.
in Golden Gate Park, is
Yep.
gorgeous, absolutely stunning, and just
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
perfect example. And that Japanese garden in Golden Gate Park, Kassy, is actually the first Japanese garden in the United States. It's the oldest and most original one. There's other great ones too that have been designed and constructed by, Japanese garden designers. But yeah, so some of the principles, stone is really, really important. That comes from Shinto beliefs that there's spirit and life in all things, and especially in stone, where we don't have a great term for this like in American culture, but like the closest is that spirits or past spirits live or reside within the stone and the boulders. And so they have to be placed very, very precisely by a master, because if you don't, you may offend the spirits, which could curse the property, versus make the spirits happy and bless the property. But you said it too. Everything is sometimes looks very natural or overgrown. Another principle is revealing things at the proper time. So you don't see everything at once. It's a journey you walk through, and things are concealed and revealed very intentionally. So there's a lot of control of how people experience the space and when they see certain things and how they see them and the perspective or point of view that they're seen from, kind of thing.
Oh, I love that. And so many other things, what I know about Japanese culture plays out that way too, with the tea ceremonies and
Yes.
the way the home design as well. So very beautiful and just absolutely stunning. And I think a better word than overgrown would be more like lush. Maybe that's what I was thinking, just like full.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing behind you too. I know that if you're listening, there's some interesting things behind Skyler and his office. Is that native Canadian artwork that you have there?
Yeah, native, it comes from the Pacific Northwest, so the Puget Sound area. That's Salish artwork, and that's some hand done. If we get technical, that's called a serigraph, so a hand done Salish art from those Native American tribes in the, British Columbia and Seattle area.
That
Yeah.
way, yeah. I used to live in Vancouver, and so I'm
Yeah.
quite familiar with that, which is why I immediately thought Canada as well. But
Yep.
that there's a specific aesthetic there as well that probably plays out in landscape in the way, because I remember going to museums in Vancouver with the native culture there, and that was very laid out very intentionally as well. Very, very beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's a principle that, as we kind of think about, well, what is, and I think about my work, what is my love and interest and experience in landscape architecture and design? How does that apply to like learning and development? And, there's some principles there, like the intentionality of it, the careful planning and the planning process that we use as landscape architects, actually fits a lot along the lines of like the ADDIE model, honestly, where we do a lot of discovery and investigation and assessment and analysis of sites before we even start like putting pen to paper or getting into CAD or whatever. It's all about understanding. I remember when I was in graduate school, we had a pretty well-known landscape architect from the Seattle area, Richard Haig, come and do some lecturing. And he had this belief that you couldn't really understand a site you were going to design unless you had spent at least 24 hours straight there. So he would like camp out on site so he really could understand what is it like at all times of day? What does it sound like at night? What animals are around? What is the morning? Where does the shadows play and all that? So in landscape design, it's very similar. And I think it relates very well from the initial investigation design to actually creating a design to building the project. And we even have in landscape architecture what we call post-occupancy evaluation. So these are when after a project is built, we come back a year, a 2 year, 3 years later and evaluate how is it functioning? How is it being used? What issues are coming up that we didn't anticipate with the site use? Where is vandalism maybe happening that we didn't anticipate? Where do people use it more heavily than others, and then make adjustments on the site from there? So similar to what we do in L&D, where we try to evaluate and process, is our training working? Did it have the effect? What needs to shift? What new iterations need to happen?
Oh my gosh. And then the beauty of all of it is that then you put it into place and it grows.
Yeah.
And it grows, and like I almost like feel kind of emotional about that. You saw me earlier, like that we're contributing to, making the space and creating it, literally creating the landscape of growth at an organization. And
Yeah.
how beautiful of a metaphor is that? Like everything you're describing, I'm thinking about the training programs and how we do it and how much we all care about it and love it and the beauty of it, and sometimes the destruction and the regrowth and all the things. It's really quite something.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's a really good point. In a landscape, we put so much work into every detail, from the material to the specific plants and what kind of soils they like, and do these plants like shade? We better put them in the shade, that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, they take on a life of their own, right? It's a living thing. And I think that's also true, as you have said so well, with the people. When we're training people, right, we put a lot of care into trying to create, whether it be a video, a PowerPoint deck, instructor-led virtual training, a keynote address. But after we kind of put it out there, right, people are so different and unique, and that training and that material kind of morphs and takes on a life of its own. And we can only hope that, like a landscape, we've done it in a way where it's going to grow and progress and develop and mature. And
You put in the right things, like you've done the assessment so that you've got the plants that will thrive in that location, be able to thrive. Even for me, I live in upstate New York, and so I'm not putting a cactus outside. Right? It's not going to be happy, you know. And I love mid-century modern design personally, so I would love to do that, but I have to find different ways to do that because it won't thrive in this environment. And knowing that, you got to know what you should put in to begin with, and what's going to be the best series of things that will have the best opportunity to then grow, and then to let it grow and to nurture it, and to help it along, and complement it, and maybe make changes as you go along too, right? It's very
right.
so beautiful.
That's right. I mean, that's where, in the company that I work for right now, we are more on the maintenance side, the after projects are built, continue to nurture and help them grow and develop. And there takes a lot of work to do that, to keep them, happy and growing and thriving and changing and things like that. So
Yeah. I mean, would you have ever thought, you learned early on the gladiola moments that,
yeah.
there's first the landscaping itself, nature and growth, and then you discover teaching, which of course is so aligned. And
Hmm.
then you end up in learning and development. But have you thought of yourself as an artist? Is it something that you realize this is artistic? Or, because I guess the question is also, somebody who's an architect, do they consider themselves an artist?
Yeah, I love that question, Cassie. I I want to unpackage that just a little bit for a minute, because when I was younger and in landscaping as a teenager and stuff like that, I knew I loved it. I did not see myself as an artist back then. I did not see that. I think I had a more narrow view of what art was. When I was in high school, I didn't take really art classes. I did some music stuff a little bit, which is an art also, but I kind of just had a narrow view of like, oh, art is painting and drawing and sculpture and stuff like that. So I didn't really see myself as an artist back then. But as I as I continued my studies, like my formal education in college and graduate school, that's where it really started to become more clear to me, like that this is an art, right? In short, it developed for me over time. So now I would say, yes, I do see myself as an artist. I do see myself as a creator of being creative in that regard. So to me, it's like the medium, instead of it being charcoal or clay or steel, it's soil and plants and leaves. And we use all the same principles and elements of design as any art does. And when I was teaching landscape architecture, we introduced students to principles and elements of design just like they would learn in their drawing class on campus, but then we apply it with a different medium, right? And I'll also say, Kassy, like I get into some other mediums too. Like I like to watercolor. That's something that I've been picking up and kind of self-teaching over the past few years. So yeah, so I would say yes. I did not see myself as an artist, but I definitely consider myself an artist.
Yeah, it's really neat. Do you think that like why do you think this is? And would this be a unique story for you or of other landscape architects that you know? Would they potentially feel the same or would it be different for them?
I don't think it's incredibly original to me. And I just as you asked that question, I had come to mind some students that I would have when I was teaching at university that would take my introduction to landscape architecture class and as an elective. And some of them were art students, so they were like art majors. And then they would come over or and they would say, "Oh my gosh, this is art, this landscape thing is also art." And some of them would actually change their major. I remember a couple because they would see like I can still be an artist, but in a more applied way. And honestly, and this is not to throw like traditional like painters, under the bus, but it was much easier to make an economical living practicing landscape art maybe than it would be for a lot of people unless they're very, very good doing paintings or drawings or whatever
Hey,
like
maybe
that.
that's the key word there, the key word applied. And and like we have a relatively narrow, we, the world, narrow definition of art. We think art is painting, and we don't see the art that is coming out in other ways, and especially in the applied artistic routes.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I was kind of getting at. Like, why is it that we would find it unusual that landscaping would not be considered art? Why are we like surprised? Because
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you talk about it, there's literally no more surprise. It's very, very obvious. So it's like, what happened there? Why did it become that?
Well, I think that landscape a lot of times is maybe taken for granted. It's kind of sets the background or the stage for our life, whether that's the room that we're in or the hotel that we're staying in or the amusement park that we're at. But I think if people will stop and think like there is a group of people who have put a tremendous amount of work and intention in creating this backdrop, this space, and that it is having an effect on you emotionally, both as a person and as a group and as a community. So a way to think about that is like if you could just imagine, what if you went to your favorite restaurant or hotel or amusement park and there were no plants at all?
Yeah, it'd be
Like,
weird.
what if it was just all asphalt? What if it was all concrete? What would that feel like? Like, you can already imagine. It probably even makes you feel a little bit like, ooh, even
Yeah,
me just saying it, right?
yeah,
So, but I don't, I don't blame people for that. Obviously it's my world, so I'm pretty nerdy about it.
yeah, of
But
course.
yeah, I would refer to it as applied art. And other things are, you said you like a few minutes ago, you said you like mid-century modern. You may appreciate that my wife and I also love mid-century modern and have a couple of Barcelona chairs in our
Oh,
home, or Mies van der Rohe chairs in
nice.
our home. And that, I mean, that's also an applied art, right?
It is.
It's a usable thing. I also, in that it's beautiful, but we actually sit on them, right? There's application. I'm also a big fan of like classic cars or motorcycles. That's something I have been involved with too, is car restoration. And to me, that's also a form of applied art and
It is.
beauty. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I have that
landscape.
same interest as well. I love the old cars. 1949 Merc, love it.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I owned a 1952 Chevrolet pickup
Ooh.
truck, so close to a year to the 49 Mercury.
My gosh. That is so interesting. That's neat.
Yeah.
Do you think when you're designing training, like are you actively thinking about it when you're designing training? Now you work at a landscape company, so this is the sort of almost an unfair question, but are you actively thinking when you're designing the training in ways that are similar to how you would be actively thinking about designing the landscaping for an event or for a place?
Yeah, I think in some regards, you kind of hinted to this, but I mean, some of our training is directly tied to like we're helping them understand the medium, right, of art, how to plant, how to make things, how colors should go together when they're planning to do a big color install, stuff like that. So some of it is very direct, but there's other things that, like if we're teaching about conflict resolution, for leaders when they have conflict in their group, or we're teaching about connecting and developing relationships with their clients, that maybe landscape art side is a little bit more indirect, but I still think that we think of it as a team and I talked about this before, that what we call the design process, which is applies to our designing a course as well as it does to landscape architecture, in that there's initial analysis and site analysis, we call it, and then we kind of design and we create and we test it and build it. And so in that way, I think, yeah, it does kind of follow that. And then we also think about, as all of us in the L&D world do, it's no different for us in our landscape company, is how is this material going to work? How is it going to be received? How are people going to interact with it? And that's a given in the L&D world, but it ties closely to like what we think about in the landscape world too. Like I build a site, how will people use the site, right?
Yeah.
What
Often
needs
does
to
something
happen?
like beauty come up when you're talking about landscaping? Because there's something that I'm just sort of making this assumption that we want to make the space beautiful, but it occurs to me that it wouldn't be always that you need to make a space beautiful. Is that correct?
In the L&D training side, is that what you mean?
I know, I mean, actually, and I want to relate it to training first, but no, I'm more in the actual landscaping and space, like for the offices, for the hotels. Is that part of the design process when you're putting out what these are going to be the plants and the space and the stones? Is how much of that would be like that beauty is an element
Yeah.
of that?
Oh,
Yeah.
I would say in the landscape world, even if it's just, I say just, but if it's a restaurant or an office complex, beauty for landscape designers and landscape architects, the beauty of it is very important.
It is always
That's
important.
our part
Okay.
of our training, is to think of it that way. To maybe give another like layer to that, we work a lot with civil engineers. And there's some a little bit of overlap, but some of the stuff we do requires some civil engineering certifications and approvals and stuff like that. Well, I have friends that are civil engineers, so what I'm about to say is true, but I don't want anybody to take it the wrong way. Like, it's important, but typically, like a civil engineer would look at a site and it's all about efficiency and mathematical and things like that. So they're not trained in the aesthetic, the
Okay.
beauty, the interaction. For us as landscape architects, it's a huge part of what we do. So we want to take, a civil engineer may want to create a detention pond that's just a square, right? Because it's very efficient and it makes sense and the slopes are perfect and it can hold this amount of water. We want to take that same detention pond and make it look like a natural pond. Like nobody would know it was an
Okay.
engineered detention pond. If
Okay.
that's some examples of it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So then now that does segue into how does this play out in learning, and when do you become the civil engineer versus the landscape architect when you're putting the learning together as it pertains to aesthetics? You know?
Well, yeah, I think that, and it takes both, right? The civil engineer side of it is really important because things need to operate properly and they need to function properly. And there's some of that engineering of our training, whether it be how we create the training in the software, right? And how it works, that quote unquote engineering behind it.
Yeah.
But the face of it, the experience for the user should be the landscape architect side. They should
Yeah.
see the detention pond as, or the training, the learning, the activity as enjoyable and helpful and has the effect of changing behavior and attitudes and work, even if they don't understand all the engineering that we as L&D professionals may put into it behind the scenes, whether that be behind the scenes, whether that be the LMS or the decks or the activities or the prep or the producer behind the scenes. I think that's kind of how I would say that in my mind.
Yeah. I thought I heard behind the seeds for just a moment
Seeds.
there,
Yeah, I
but I'm
did
just gonna
say
put that out
seeds. I did say that was a
there.
little slip there.
I
I'm too
love
much
it.
into the horticulture.
But like that really worked quite well though. So like
Yeah.
aesthetics as it pertains to learning, we start to broaden the concept of aesthetics to be beyond something beautiful, but rather just useful and pleasing and effective, starts to become like, how do we experience the
Yeah.
environment?
Yeah, true, true. I would say this too, just to be like vulnerable and candid, for only in the past year, again, we're a pretty new team and I came from the landscape world. So I'm like climbing uphill on a fast trajectory to learn the L&D side of things, which is enjoyable, but I've been kind of frustrated in years past with what we were creating as far as e-learning in our LMS because it didn't look the way I wanted it to look. So we had to start with where we are, but now we are in Articulate and Premiere Pro, and now it's like, okay, now we can start to make this aesthetically look the way we want it to look. We can have the colors that we want. We can have the high quality images from our marketing team. We can really build out not just the look and feel, but also the arc and the process of how they experience the learning in a way that
Yeah.
I am much more happy about.
There's that artist. There it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're concerned about that from the engagement side, and that
Right,
paying attention to that thing is important and valid.
right.
So I'm a learning and development professional and I'm listening to you today, and I'm not a landscape architect and I have nothing, I don't understand it at all, but I love everything I've heard from you today. And I'm wondering if there's anything you could teach me or give me as a tool or a strategy where I could feel like, whew, I just applied some landscape architecture to my learning program there. Thank you, Skyler. Is there anything you could give us just for us regular folk maybe who don't have the background that you do?
Well, I know this isn't what you're asking, but I always love answering like horticulture landscape questions. I often get that side of things like, can you help me with this? Or what's this plant or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we've probably shared a few of how, the design process. Maybe if there's one nugget, and this isn't maybe the best or the only one, but I'll just say this one because it's on my mind, but observation. Observation is so, so important. I talked earlier in our call about as landscape designers, we put a lot of effort into the early analysis, understanding a site, and observation is really, really important. So we know that as L&D professionals, if we're going to develop training or identify what needs to be developed, we should go out and listen to the end users, right? We should listen to the people that need the training or that we feel need the training or whose managers say they need the training. We should listen to them. We should reach out to them. We should really observe what their experience is like. And that's true of landscaping. It's hard to create a really successful, beautiful landscape if we don't first understand the site. Now, we don't have to spend a whole entire night, 24 hours camping there like the landscape architect that I talked about, Richard Haig, did, but it's really, really crucial. Right now at Landcare, we're working on a lot of training for more of our like frontline production people that are out actually doing the landscaping out in the sun. We have been spending a lot of time really trying to understand their world and how we create training that will resonate best with them and that is best usable for those people that are out. They're not sitting at an office at a computer, right? They're out in the field. They're on their phones. How do we deliver that way? So I don't know. That's a long answer, but I think that observation is so, so important. I think that to me applies to both.
Yeah, I what I'm thinking here is that maybe in L&D we can get a little overwhelmed by make sure you do your needs assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you to reframe that with the word observation somehow just made me feel like, well, obviously I need to do that. And I can't imagine that anybody would landscape any place without first observing it. And so now I'm thinking I really shouldn't build any training without first observing in a way and getting maybe out of that the pressure of do the needs assessment, and the feelings that might come with that. And of course we do that, but there's something harder about that. And the word observation just opened that up and made it feel a little bit more accessible and like that I wanted to lean into it rather than feel maybe overwhelmed by it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it makes it a little more human because I've used the term site analysis. We also use the term client analysis, right? Client needs analysis for a site. Like, it's important, but that's kind of technical and it's a process and it makes it a little bit more cold. So, but it's all just observation. We're just
It is.
observing. It makes it a little bit more human.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. I love this entire conversation because you've taken us from, you've taken me from, I don't know how this relates, but wait, of course, it all makes the most perfect sense. And I don't know why I didn't know that already. So thank you for
You're
that
welcome.
insight and for that passion and just
Yeah.
for all that you're bringing into the world too. And let's keep designing beautiful, aesthetically pleasing learning experiences for people. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll just throw out an invitation to the audience as you're listening and thinking about landscaping, like Kassy and I are today, that I'll just invite you to observe the landscaping around you as you move around your day and travel around. Just take a moment and observe. Maybe you'll have your own, what did I say, the Gladiolus moment that
Yeah,
I just somehow created during our interview today. But
love it. I love that. We have some homework. Observe around you and take note because it is one of those things that maybe we wouldn't notice per se. And that's part of the beauty as well. You just know that you feel good in that space or you're drawn to that space or maybe that's why you keep going back there.
that's right. That's right.
I love that. I'm doing it. I made a note.
I guess I can't help but give some homework as a teacher, right? We can't help it.
We
We have
expected it.
to give some action items to our audience.
I think that's a perfect way for us to close out, and we expected that 100%. So thank you again for being with us today, Skyler. It's been a pleasure. That's your spark. Now go light something up. And hey, if this episode lit you up, share it with a friend, a fellow facilitator, or someone who needs a little more connection in their day. Be sure to follow the Spark Konnect so you don't miss what's next. We've got more brilliant voices, bold ideas, and heart-forward conversations coming your way. Until then, stay curious, stay brave, and keep showing up.